Hello, it's John Heaton, and today I'm going to take you through some, well, I was going to say bad, should we say not so good album covers, so following on from the 10 I chose the other day of my favourites. And again, this is just from my collection, so there's a lot of bad album covers which cannot possibly be on this list because I don't have them. And this whole video was probably triggered, and the previous one, from a recent Rolling Stone article in which they put together their top 50 worst album covers. And very controversially, they featured this album in the top 50 worst album covers, which is pretty staggering, really. They were saying that the concept is okay, but the collage is a mess, and the portrait of George is terrible. Well, actually, this didn't make my list into my top covers, and it's not my favourite Beatles cover, but it's certainly one of the best. And I don't know what they were talking about. I think they're just trying to deliberately be controversial, and they can go forth and multiply as far as I'm concerned. So the other thing with the Rolling Stone, predictably, this album was in the top 50, and the only comment that they had was, the main takeaway from this picture is God is a righty. I was wondering what righty meant, and I looked it up, and apparently in America the main meaning is right-handed. Well, what was Tony Wright supposed to draw? A left-handed God? Or a God with a missing finger, or what? And it's a metaphorical image anyway of God saving a whole load of people. And for some reason, the religious imagery really upsets people. And Tony Wright is a distinguished artist. He'd done covers for Bob Marley and Traffic, and Steve Winwood. And no one had a problem with Michelangelo, his picture of God touching Abraham's hand. I know it's not on the same level, but this is not a terrible piece of art. And I quite like it. And apparently when Tony Wright said to Bob Dylan, what do you think? This is my draft of the picture. Bob said, yeah, very, very good. Just put a bit more blood into the hands. So I thought that was quite interesting, because I had an email exchange with Tony Wright a few years ago. So I will defend this album cover. I don't care what Rolling Stone said. I mean, there are a few choices in their top 50 which obviously were deserved, and quite amusing comments about that, but too many which made it in there, which disappointed me. But I suppose that's in the nature of all lists, isn't it? And you're probably going to be disappointed with some of the ones I've included here. So before I get to what have I got for you? Top 15. Bottom 15. Before I get to that, I'm just going to show 3 album covers which I think are just boring. And they didn't even make the list because they're so boring that one virtually has no comment. They're all from the 80s. Incidentally, this is Neil Young, Reactor, 1981. I'm not sure what the point of that is, just boring, as I said. ELO, Balance of Power, very dull. And then Radio Chaos from Roger Waters, 1987. I mean, people had got away with doing minimalist covers over the years. One thinks of the White Album in particular, of course. And there have been other examples where it works quite well. Making Movies, Dire Straits is okay because of the blue little bit on the side. I think that works okay. Talking Heads 77 is just a plain red cover. Fear of Music from Talking Heads again is green and black like this, but it's got a very nice texture to the album sleeve which makes it interesting. This Radio Chaos is just dull as dishwater, and look at that. This is the back cover. You think the front cover is boring, and then he actually rivaled himself with his most recent solo album. Is this? I think it's called something like "Is This the World We Really Want?" And that, if you check that out, has a very dull cover as well. So Roger Waters not known for his album covers in particular. So number 15, I'm going to go to my bottom 15 now, and I'm going to point out that some of these covers are not sort of bad by definition, but I just don't like them. So I guess you can say it's subjectively bad for me, but you might quite like them. And I guess this one's going to upset a few people. So number 15, I've gone with David Bowie's Young Americans. I just think this is a bit of a cheesy image he went with. Plus the fact I didn't particularly like this period of his career. I think it was a bit of a weak link in the otherwise golden 70s period that he came from Hunky Dory to Scary Monsters. Young Americans is a slight dip in quality, and he would recover with Station to Station the following year. But if you compare this to Station to Station or Diamond Dogs, I think it comes up short. And the cover is just, well, again, it's just not my favourite image of Bowie, but you might quite like it. Number 14, I've gone with Rolling Stones. I guess this must have been in vogue at the time, this kind of electronic imagery, because Talking Heads the same year, 1980, Remain in Light was just the four faces of the band on the front in this kind of distorted fashion. But this one, you can hardly recognise any of the figures, like if these are the Rolling Stones at all. And it's just the only advantage, this is a spare copy I have, the only advantage of this album is it came with a colour poster. But again, it was full of all this these funny images. But this cover is not even colour, it's just basically blue and white. And I'm not sure what they were thinking. Could have chosen Goat's Head Soup. I don't think that's a particularly good cover either. And I could have chosen Undercover from '83. I think that's a poor cover. Dirty Work often gets chosen as amongst the worst covers, but at least that's a portrait of the band, albeit in their garish red and yellow clothes a la mid-80s. Anyway, that was the Stones. Now we've got Dylan, number 13, Planet Waves. I think he drew this picture, and it's just like almost like a child's picture, and the back is almost like child's handwriting as well. And I think there's even a lyric sheet inside with the same, which doesn't add anything, because it's the same as the back cover as far as I can see. And yeah, Planet Waves. Well, he's come up with some great album covers in his career, but this was not one of them. And Blood on the Tracks from just under a year after this album was a superb cover, and so was Desire, so was Street Legal, so was Slow Train Coming, and he'd come up with some good covers, but this was not. I suppose the other one I could have chosen is Self Portrait, but I quite like Self Portrait because it's so kind of it's almost deliberately bad, and it's actually quite amusing. But anyway, that was Planet Waves. Number 12. Oh yeah, again, this is not bad, but it's just, I don't think it just works as a Led Zeppelin album cover, and it's by those geniuses, Hypnosis, who normally come up with the goods, but here I think it misfires a bit. They got this mysterious black object which appears in the album artwork. It's supposed to be sort of enigmatic. You're not supposed to know what it means, but I just think, you know, that a picture of a family sitting around a table is not really kind of the image of Led Zeppelin I expect when I buy an album of theirs. And they had some great album covers. Houses of the Holy comes to mind, Led Zeppelin 2, Physical Graffiti with that building in New York, and In Through the Outdoor, of course, which I featured in my top list. But Presence, I think it's not one of Hypnosis' finest works. Number 11, we got Supertramp. Well, they almost set the standard for album covers, but their second album, is kind of very obvious and not very subtle, and indelibly stamped as the name of the album, and it's got a very sort of grainy black and white picture in the gatefold. I just think this is it's not in the same league as the other album covers, Crime of the Century, Quietest Moments, Crisis, and Breakfast. So that's Supertramp. Number 10, I think this featured in my video all those years ago, 10 years ago when I started my channel. I seem to remember this one was quite high, and it's still high on my list, High Voltage. I just don't know what they were thinking. Are they trying to sort of sell themselves as some kind of cartoon band? they were hardly known when this album came out, so they were trying to make a name for themselves. I think the Australian cover has an alternative album cover, or I'm not sure, or this particular cover was only released in certain territories. I can't remember which way around. The back cover is slightly better because it has sort of letters written by teachers to sort of Angus's parents or Malcolm's parents saying that your son is dreadfully misbehaving. That's quite amusing. Anyway, that was AC/DC. Number 9, we're going to go with Fate for Breakfast from Art Garfunkel. I don't know what he was thinking. I mean, and if you think the front cover's bad, and it's not too bad, but then the back cover is, I don't know, he's just got in from a late night and he's eating this fairly disgusting looking cold chicken dish, and I don't know why, it's just a dreadful album cover, but it's quite a good album. It's got Bright Eyes on it, which was a huge hit in most parts of the world. Number 8, we've got, this is going to upset a few people probably, Pet Sounds. One doesn't really imagine a band which one likes just posing with the animals at the zoo. It's not really the image of a rock band, and it's harmless enough, but it should have been an outtake rather than the actual cover. And this cover also sort of smacks of commercialism. It's heavily sort of promoting the single Sloop John B, and then with these other tracks, and it's just this sort of fairly ghastly packaging, which a lot of albums in America in particular were guilty of. And this picture is just, I mean, it's so not indicative of the contents of the record, it's not even funny. I mean, they could have come up with 1,000 ways to illustrate the music inside this record, which is pretty magical. But this picture at the zoo doesn't do it for me. Horses for Courses, you're not going to agree, all of you, so that's fine. Number 7, I know a lot of you like this album, and I don't mind it. I've been trying to get into it over the years, but I can't get into the cover. I mean, that is just lazy. That's just like, let's just write it in weird writing, and then that'll do as the cover. And then you got this sort of denim on the back. And, Elton's come up with some good covers himself over the years. And I can think of Greatest Hits and Greatest Hits Volume 2, 2 great covers. Yellow Brick Road was imaginative. Captain Fantastic is a fantastic cover, pun not intended. But Madman Across the Water, not very imaginative. Number 6, we've got Harry Nilsson kind of trying to do a parody of John Lennon's sort of Walls and Bridges picture, where his glasses, he's wearing 6 pairs of glasses, but Harry Nilsson just looks drunk or stoned in this picture. And unfortunately, it's a bit too much of an honest reflection of what he was, or even if he's not stoned or pissed or drunk, well, what's the point of this picture? It looks ugly. And actually, the music inside this album is particularly fine. And I say it's his best latter-day album, best album since Pussycats, in my opinion, up to the day he died. So an unfortunate cover from Harry there. Number 5, we've got The Cure, their debut albums, and the album's called Three Imaginary Boys. So what do they put on the cover? A lamp, a fridge, and a Hoover. I mean, it's just terrible. And people say, The Cure weren't known for their album covers, but Faith is a good album cover. 17 Seconds is a good album cover. Even Pornography is not a bad cover. And but this first one, there's no excuse for that, really. It's terribly dull. Number 4, we've got, this is way before the days of selfies, but this is almost like a bad photo, or not quite a selfie, but it's just him in a corner store, or just out of focus on the back. Maybe that's deliberate, maybe it's trying to be artsy or something, but it's my least favourite Paul Simon album cover, certainly up to this point. And in a similar vein, although I don't have it on vinyl, thankfully, probably, because it's such a bad cover, you got Paul McCartney's Driving Rain in 2001. Well, that is a selfie, and it's just dreadful. It must have taken 5 seconds to shoot, and it cost nothing to do. And unfortunately, this was the way things were going. Artists were spending less time on their covers. compared to the 70s heyday. And I think it's a terrible cover. Not a bad album though, Driving Rain. Number 2, we got Blind Faith, the self-titled album from 1969. And again, I was reading about this, the artist saying it was supposed to reflect the innocence of youth with the technology of tomorrow. But either way you look at it, it's a provocative image. You wouldn't get away with it today. The girl on the front is only 11. And if you think, you give them the benefit of the doubt for this, on their tour program, Blind Faith had an older girl, admittedly naked, but covered up by her long hair for the important parts, blindfolded on a crucifix. Again, supposed to be some sort of bizarre reflection of blind faith, but it's that was tasteless as well. And one can't help thinking that the band did this just to generate a few sales. I don't know, because the record company didn't want to put it out. Eric insisted, and even in America, it was not chosen as a cover. They just chose a band shot. So that's Blind Faith. Yeah, I never liked that cover. Number 1, I think this was number 1 in my list 10 years ago, and it's still number 1. It's a dreadful album cover from Denny Laine, 1985, I think, yeah. Hometown Girls, Denny on his phone surrounded by all these beauties. And yeah, what can you say? It's just terrible. And when I handed this to Denny to sign in a pub in 1987 in London, he signed it for me on the back saying, "Well, Jay, you must be serious, Denny Laine." The album is not terrible. It's got a couple of good tracks on it, but what a bad cover. So that was my bottom 15 or 15 of my least favourite album covers from my collection. There's an awful lot which I know of which are not in my collection. But that was that. Hope you enjoyed it, and sorry if you didn't agree. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.